believers, non-believers, unaffiliated believers, sort of believers, and even you think I'm a believers, welcome to the Uncensored Unprofessor, a podcast where we do our best to interpret life through a theologic lens, a show where we address things about which today's church is both terrified and silent. Today I have a special guest, an interview to share with you. But before I get to that, please know that it makes me happy to know that this show is free for anyone and everyone. But there are costs involved. And I'd like to think my own time is valuable too. So we produce and pay for the UU using OPM, other people's money. My monthly supporters go to Patreon, Patreon, and make $5, $10, $20, $30, $50, even $100 pledges. For pledges that are $20 or more, I send out various copies of my 4 published books. You'd make my day if you joined the Unteam at Patreon, Patreon. Give it a consideration. Thanks. Today I'm talking about education and homeschooling with Britton La Tulippe, founder and president of BlueManorAcademy.com. Again, that's BlueManorAcademy.com. We're going to talk about education in Western culture and the challenges parents, and now society, all face. It's time we look at this with our eyes wide open. So raise your UU coffee mug with me in a toast to Britton La Tulippe. I'm happy today on the Uncensored Unprofessor to have Britton La Tulippe join me. He is a homeschooler, an out-of-the-box thinker, and he has written and illustrated, both written and illustrated, a new children's book called Be Great. So Britton, glad to have you on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Tell me how you came about writing this book, Be Great, for kids.
Yeah, so I've written a whole bunch of children's books. I write for Blue Manor Academy. I write and illustrate. I'm the president of Blue Manor's Academy, but there's not a whole lot of us working, so I have a lot of hats on. And this was a main part of our curriculum. I'll just show you the book. A main part of our curriculum, because as we started to put this together, we realized if we duplicated the public school model, there were so many heroes that weren't Christian. So many kids were learning, they were being held up to heroes like Benjamin Franklin, and they might be heroes of the Revolutionary War, but they weren't necessarily Christian heroes. And then I started thinking, I learned a ton about the heroes, and it was really exciting up until about I was 5 or 6 years old and entered school from church. And I had like the heroes David and Samson and Moses, and it was really exciting. And then all of a sudden it ended, and we did continue to study the Bible, but it wasn't necessarily about heroes. And then all of a sudden when you enter school, you start learning about the secular heroes, and you just totally forget. And then you forget that the church existed after Christ left and the apostles left and the Bible ended.
Yeah.
The church continued to exist. We have great heroes. And it's funny, when I published this book, how many Christian parents were like, I've never even heard of these people. It's
oh
like,
my goodness.
These are huge, huge, huge names, and kids have never even heard of them. And so that was really what prompted it. We want to start introducing the heroes at an early age. And if you read the book, this is for young children. It's just a little poem about each one, but really it's important because it introduces the name and just a little concept of why they were a hero. And then we can start adding more layers to that.
See, I'm always thinking in terms of pedagogy and how to shape people. My mission as a professor was ultimately to shape people for Christ. The information was just a vehicle toward that. So here we have your book, which is about Christian heroes, and I'm thinking pedagogy, but there is the whole historic angle to it. You have parents now who are going to be learning about church history and heroes in the church, and that's certainly a worthwhile endeavor on its own right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. It ties into history for sure. And the history that we're learning in school, it is, I would say it's an Enlightenment history. It's a liberal history. In Revealing School, I've written a lot of books. This little one, this is the first one I wrote.
Wow, a thick one there, yeah.
Yeah, it's Revealing School. I talk about socialist fables is what history is. We've learned a whole lot of socialist fables. And so, and the socialist fables are getting worse and worse and worse. They're actually using history in school to take our heroes down. So they're taking Christian heroes and making them the villains, and then they're raising up their own heroes. And we tend to think, oh, this is just happening right now in the last few years. Well, no, this has been happening for 500 years. And it's been happening since in the schools since the Advent. You go all the way back to 1852. You had the first public school, truly public school, under Horace Mann in Massachusetts. And he was accused of being this godless, horrible socialist who was corrupting the children. And that was, we think it went wrong in the 60s. Like, no, it's been going wrong for a long time. So
Yeah. So I've been thinking aloud with my listeners for a couple months now on culture, obviously in light of the last 3 years with the COVID. I call it slotch, government over administration, choking our lives out, the George Floyd riots, the absolute insanity of the elections, and now we're seeing godlessness through sexuality at least being propped up as sort of the new work of the day, the new flavor of the day. So I'm thinking a lot about culture, and there might not be anything more important than education and educating our children, especially in the middle of this cultural landslide. Does that play into your own efforts and what you're doing?
yes. So I'll just show you. This is it. So this is
He's
called
holding up four big
four
books here.
books, four big books. So it's hard to even know where to start. I would just say that in America, by design, from the beginning, there's a two-tiered education system. There is, I would say, the public school model, and that includes the homeschoolers who are doing public school better. And there's some good things. They have some character training. They're with their parents. There's lots of good things about homeschool world, but they've accepted the public school model, and so they continue to raise up common children who excel at commonness. They do better on the standardized tests and stuff. And then you have the tier that nobody's heard about, and that is not the private schools, because I consider those public schools in the mode of the public schools. But you have the elite prep schools, and the elite prep schools run society. And so we Christians have no champions in the field right now. And our last four presidents have been prep schoolers. You look at Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, these are all prep schoolers. So there's definitely a two-tiered education system in the country. And most people think that that is just a difference of money. Like, these prep schools are so expensive that they probably get the best teachers and the best facilities, and they're just basically doing public school, but better. Well, I got to go to a prep school. I went to a boarding school in Virginia, Fort Union Military Academy, very similar to what Donald Trump attended. And I got to see the other side. And I'm telling you, it's a night and day difference. It's the antithesis of public education. So, and I know we're jumping off now in a totally different direction, but
we're not jumping off. This is exactly what I want folks to think through. It's not just a matter of cost. The prep schools are actually doing something different than the public and the private schools.
Yeah, and it's by design, and it's really scary, but it's a thrown fight. So we have this democratic society, we're told, and anybody's allowed to enter the arena. But I don't know if you see my ears, I fight. Okay, I've done jujitsu and wrestling my whole life and boxing and stuff. But I'd put it like this. It's like anybody's allowed to get into the ring, but the prep schoolers have been trained from a very early age in MMA and weightlifting and mixed martial arts and jujitsu, right? Like, they're champions. And then you have your Joe Smo who went to public school who was trained in yoga. And then they're both allowed to get into the arena. And unless it's divinely ordained, like a David and Goliath story, the public schooler, homeschooler, private schooler has no chance to take down these prep schoolers.
Okay.
And you look at George. Okay.
No, go ahead.
Well, you look at somebody like George Bush or Donald Trump, and a lot of people will think they're idiot, or Biden. These guys are idiots. These guys are, they're idiots. They're dumb people, and they don't know their geography, or they misspell words. And that's because we're public schoolers, and we think that's important. Like, he doesn't know how to spell words. They haven't been trained in that. That's not that important. They have been trained in the subjects of greatness. So they know how to rule a country. They know how to lead. They know how to organize, create a cabal, right? Where the average homeschooler or public schooler thinks, if I do well in my spelling and my math and get good grades and go to a good college, like, I'll be successful. But spelling, it's kind of important, but you don't rule the world with spelling.
Okay, that's excellent. So my daughter-in-law, Lauren, who knows you, told me just a snippet of your story of how you wound up in an educational process that was unique. So give us some of your background so people can hear you. This is a lived thing for you. This is not just abstract. You didn't just read a bunch of books. You lived through Well, a life story that has brought you to this point. What informs that?
So I think I started off like everybody else. Maybe I went to some public schools. My parents put me in some private schools, and I went to a whole bunch. I traveled all these different states. So a lot of people think, oh, I went to a bad public school, but I got to go to public schools in I think 6 or 7 different states. And I went to 3 private schools, Christian schools. So I got to see that side. I was in really a lot of trouble. I almost got expelled in 6th grade for just being like a class clown, crazy kid they couldn't control. And so I got to experience homeschooling a little bit, once or twice. And then in 9th grade, there was a lot of home issues. My parents were divorced, and there's just different things. And my mom decided to send me to a boarding school, a military boarding school, for some discipline. So it's a huge blessing. And I showed up there, and it just transformed my world in an afternoon. You stepped onto campus and you realize I'm in a different place. And I went from being some
Wow.
punk kid in public school to being like, I'm gonna rule the world. And that's what they teach you. I mean, they brought us into the chapel and they're like, I know some of you guys are from different backgrounds and you guys think that you guys are here to be disciplined or here to get a good education or whatever, whatever reason you think you're here. He's like, really, like, this is your destiny. Like, you've been brought here and we are going to prepare you to change the world.
Wow.
And you weren't thinking about getting a job as a doctor or lawyer. You're thinking about being like a CEO or a president or it was just a different mentality. And I got
It's
to
so
room with
funny. It's so funny because at the Christian college where I was, which would be to say all schools are the same way, right? They all think that they are sending out ambassadors or they're sending out world changers, and all of the commencement and all the commencement and convocation speeches would be about going out and changing the world. And really they're just teaching them all how to be mediocre. And you're saying you landed at this prep school, now we might say out of the providence of God. And right off the bat, their goal was not to help you spell I before E except after C. They're already giving you an entirely different worldview that is essentially going out and being leaders and being great and in fact changing the world.
Yes, and they said similar things when I entered junior high school. They brought us into the auditorium. The principal made some speech about, you're at a great educational institution and you'll do things, and you just didn't believe it. You just knew it wasn't true, and you
Right.
looked around the students. You're like, these aren't world changers, right? When you went to prep school, you believed it and you knew it, and it's very exclusive. Like, we had our own prep school league. I was shocked because I won. I got third in state in wrestling, and when I was looking it up, it said on the back, it said prep school league. So I actually wasn't third in Virginia State. We didn't wrestle any private or public schools. We had our own little league. We only competed with each other. We only knew each other, associated with each other. And that was part of it too. They were trying to separate a noble class. Think of like the Republic and the Guardians. So they were separating us on purpose. Like,
Yeah.
and you, Clarence Thomas came and spoke at our school. I think it was like a year before I came. And I was roommates with a Krispy Kreme donut kid. And so you just realize, like, I'm in a unique place. Like, it's true here. Like, these kids it's special. And then you knew it because the education was different. It was no joke. They didn't tolerate any nonsense. And the standard was so high. You knew, okay, I am being prepared. Like, it's different. It's not public school anymore. I don't know if that makes sense. You
No,
sense
that's really cool. It's
kids
actually
putting up.
exciting for me to get a sense of that we have a local I won't I guess it doesn't matter. It's called the Ambrose School here in Boise, and I went up and
I live in Boise for a while. I know the Ambrose.
okay, I toured it a couple times and got to know the principal and some of the folks there, and it was so exciting because just by aesthetics the place felt different. The kids wore uniforms. They were about excellence. They were teaching them the great civilization. It wasn't, I mean, I'm serious. As a parent, I watched my kids go through, and in a lot of respects, they got a good education, but the tremendous bulk of it was a promotion of mediocrity and sameness and getting the kids to buy into the same values. Sounds like that prep school you went to was an entirely different animal.
Yeah, and Ambrose is really good for Idahoans to see. I think it's the closest thing. There is an actual prep school in Sun Valley, and I've seen that and been to that. It's a real prep school. Ambrose is the closest thing we have, I'd say,
Okay.
in the Boise area to prep school. I've been there. My kids competed in chess tournaments there. So it's very close. And you do feel a sense of greatness when you enter that campus and you go to the library.
Yeah.
It's a different respectability there.
Yeah.
And it's a different mission. And they do a good job educating. So I
But
wouldn't
yours
slight
was
them.
still different because where you attended was still different in what way?
Well, they taught, well, and I would say I don't want to hold up the prep schools too much, too, because that's not exactly what Blue Manor Academy is. Like, we're going in a little bit different direction.
Okay.
But in the prep schools, they focus on the subjects of greatness. They still teach spelling and history and all the other subjects, right? But it's a full experience. You board there, so they have you day and night, and they hone in on the subject of greatness. So, for example, one of those is society. You need to form a noble and powerful herd. You don't just befriend anybody. I talk about that in power. It's like you can have associations, you can be kind and be charitable to everybody, but you need to build a noble herd, allies, somebody who in life will have your back no matter what. So I say, instead of like who's fun people are a dime a dozen. Invite them to your party, Christmas party, but you need friends who are allies for war in hard times and in good times. So one of those things is society, and they talk to you about networking and staying with these people. And you really did have business networking, like you're roommating with some kid who's a billionaire's son or something. So if you guys start a business together, like you have all of the connections. We had senators' kids there and stuff. So it was a powerful association. I don't know how much of that is in Ambrose. A lot of it's good Christian education.
Well,
It's
I'm not here to
classical.
prop up Ambrose, even though I like it.
Oh no, and I love it. I love it too.
I want to hear your thinking about.
Well, and it's not a boarding school, so it's not like the full body experience of the prep schools where it's like day and night.
Yeah.
It's very academically rigorous. I would say it's classical education, basically.
Okay.
And it's good. I love classical education, but there's a distinction.
So prep schools more commonly you're actually living on campus.
Usually they're boarding schools.
Okay.
There are some day students, but generally speaking, they're boarding schools.
And where you went, was that a decidedly Christian institution?
Yeah, it's really weird at the prep schools because you have basically a lot of atheists go there too because it's an outstanding education. It was founded by Baptists originally. And so we did have chapel and stuff. I don't know that it was, and there were a lot of teachers who were Christian. So they definitely had that on campus. So yeah, it was Christian. But like I said, there were a lot of atheists who went there. There were a lot of different denominations who went there. And they were just there for an outstanding education. They didn't necessarily.
Was it K through 12?
No, they usually start, because it's boarding school, it usually starts in middle school. So we had middle school through high school.
Okay.
It's like a finishing school.
Right.
And character is the primary focus. The subjects
are great. That's where I was going to go next. What are your big takeaways from that experience that you would want to commend to parents and thinking Christians?
Well, one is the book Power, where you need to focus on the subjects of greatness, the things that are most important. History is pretty important. I think it's more important to learn about the heroes of history and where we come from and stuff like that. But the things that are really essential to your life and powerful are like family. Like that's one. And people don't know how to run a family anymore. They don't know how to raise up a powerful family, a generational family anymore. There's no focus on wealth. Even in the homeschooling world, there's a little bit of focus on entrepreneurship, but how to create great wealth. And you don't do that as an individual entrepreneur usually. Usually you build a family of wealth. And I talk about that in the book, like how the old aristocracy handled wealth, built wealth, and passed it on generationally. So that's an important subject. Leadership. You can't learn leadership in a classroom. Like you go to college, you take a class on leadership or a class on public speaking, which is the antithesis of public speaking, oration. So you can't learn that in a class in an afternoon. You have to start that at a very early age. The power of oration is probably the most powerful thing you can have next to wealth, maybe more powerful than wealth in certain situations. And there's a huge emphasis on that. And command presence. When I went to military school, it was a student-led academy. That means the adults went home at night. That means you only went to the adults when there was a crime committed or your student leadership had totally failed. But it was a student-led academy. I became a sergeant. I could discipline people. I inspected their rooms. I made sure they did their homework. So I had real leadership opportunities, not student council. We all vote to plant a tree on Earth Day. It was like I was in charge of my floor. I was responsible for them. I led parades, I inspected rooms. And you could literally discipline people. I could send them out there for tours of duty. One tour is 45 minutes of marching or saluting the sun with your gun. It's so miserable in any weather. It's horrible. And you get caught with tobacco, you could do 25 tours, and I could write that as a student and send you out for that discipline. I could make you clean the toilets, right? So you actually got to experience leadership and what I call command presence. You build a command presence, which is what they teach the officers in the military. So yeah, I think that was the difference. Like, you had real opportunities for leadership.
And there was a sense of community there that must far transcend what would happen in a public school setting.
Yeah, in a lot of the prep schools, there is. Yeah, there's. It's a tight note. It's a. I don't want to build it up like it's perfect either, because there was a lot of fights that go on and stuff, but you'd be surprised how well that academy run with students in charge. You'd think it was a lot of bullying and abuse but actually students did very well. A lot of them rose to the occasion. And we had some of the worst, because a lot of the other kids get kicked out of public or prep schools and then they go to the military school. It's not a fun place necessarily. So we were getting some of the worst kids, and the transformation that happened was phenomenal. Like, we had one kid, he was supposed to go to prison or military school. His parents were rich enough for military school. So he ended up there. And by the end of it, he was one of the highest ranking officers in the academy. He was just totally squared away. So they transformed these kids immediately. It was amazing.
That's awesome. So now you're a dad. How many kids do you guys have?
We only have 8.
Only 8 kids.
Only 8
so
kids. Yeah.
You have 8 guinea pigs that you get to bring your theory, your understanding of pedagogy. And again, I would say as a dad of 8 who cares passionately about education, what are those core commitments? What are those core elements, those core lines of passion that you have brought to bear on the raising and educating of your own children?
So we've talked about prep schools a lot. What we do is different at Blue Manor Academy, and what I'm doing with my children is different than prep school education. It's funny. The prep school was originally invented for poor people. It was King Henry, I think it was Henry II, maybe, who built Eton College. And it was to give 70 poor kids an academic education. But truly, the king's children were homeschooled. They had tutors and stuff like that. And a lot of times they were educated at their father's side. They rode into battle together. Like the famous story in one of my books, I think it's Character or Power, the story of the Black Prince, and how his father in battle sent him out and said, today he earns his spurs, so to speak. So they came running. They're like, hey, the prince is like being pinned down. Like, what should we do? Should we send reinforcements? And he's like, is his life in danger? He's like, not yet. And he's like, then he'll earn his spurs today. Like a true like rite of passage. And they were educated by their parents. Parents were hugely involved in that. After the Enlightenment, it's a long story, but they took over the prep schools, which were like charities for poor people's kids, funded by the kings, and they took them over and they became like the elite academies to send your kids to. And so I really want to restore the aristocratic education, like the kings, how they educated their children. So that would be
that for every kid, every parent who wants that for their kids. You want that for them.
I want that for them. I want to reintroduce truly an elite education, raising children for greatness, and it comes from the home. Your kid should be beside you. I'd like to get dads back in the home if possible, and we have to build wealth for that to happen, because most dads,
right,
they have to go get a job. They have to support their family. It's just become common for men to work outside of the home. It wasn't necessarily that way a few generations ago. Well, a few hundred years ago. So that's what I have envisioned for the Raising Children for Greatness movement. My kids are beside me. My kids right now, we're building Blue Manor Academy. They work in the academy. My daughter writes for Blue Manor Academy. And it's how she's becoming a better writer. I edit her stuff, then we put it on the academy. So she's building up that academy. And we will pass our wealth on like they used to do in the olden days. And
so tell us about, and I don't want to get off the notion of pedagogy and theories of education, but tell us about Blue Manor Academy so people can link up with you or learn about you, learn about your books. Tell us about the academy. Tell us about your books.
Okay, so the academy is tough. We're working on it. I'm building it. I'm funding it all myself. So it's not what I want it to be yet, but it is a great education. And then it has these books in here. And this is really what it is, because the academy can only do so much without the parents being involved. You cannot learn courage, for example, from a book. You have to learn character through labors, trials, You have to train character. I give the example of the military. I was in the military. We jumped out of airplanes, airborne school. We were all valued courage. We didn't need a lesson in courage. But when you're looking down, 1,500 feet, about ready to jump out of an airplane, it's terrifying. You have to train courage. And the military does that very well. Like you have I think it's the 10 fears or 12. I forget. I wrote it in the book Character, but you have these natural fears and people say, oh, I'm afraid of heights. No, everybody's afraid of heights. Okay. Everybody's afraid of heights. Everybody's afraid of tight spaces, claustrophobia. Yeah. Everybody has that.
Yeah.
Well, the military knows this. I don't know if you know my background, but I went through special forces training. So the Green Beret course.
Okay.
And you train through those fears. Like one of them is claustrophobia. So you have this obstacle course and it basically goes downhill. So you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel and then it breaks and goes up. So it's completely pitch dark and the tunnel gets a little bit narrower and there's water in the bottom. And then they stack you and they're like sardines. You have to climb through this tunnel. It's extremely scary. And you do get claustrophobic. You have people behind you, in front of you, and people getting stuck in the tunnel. They understand that and they train you through that. That's character training. How do you train courage? And then you have these warriors who are just like fearless. Well, they took a lot of training to get them to that point.
Okay.
Jumping out of the airplane. I don't know anybody that wasn't terrified to jump out the first time, unless they'd done it before. So the first time, terrifying. You do 5-6 jumps. It's fun. You're just jumping off, like waving at your buddies. Like it's a great time. But the first jump was horrifying. So you can train character for greatness. The kings would do that. They'd use the hunts and you hunt a wild boar with a spear. That's dangerous, but they knew, okay, you have to, that's how you train a child for combat. And you instill that courage. And they had those labors as part of the core curriculum because you can't have a cowardly king. Eventually he has to lead his army into battle. So we have to train the character for greatness. There's nothing like that in public school.
Nothing
like that. Sports is maybe the closest thing you have.
Yeah.
And single combat sports like wrestling, I think that's pretty good, but it's not part of the official curriculum. It's just an extra credit.
Right.
So
you got Blue Manor Academy, and this is a publishing house. This is a consortium of teachers. What's Blue Manor Academy?
So it's just an online academy, preschool through 6th grade. We're starting to add 7th and 8th grade. It is the great books, for example, not just the classics, but the great books. So one of those should be the Bible, but you have a whole library of great books that the kids are no longer reading in the schools. It's the histories. It is videos. I say it all the time. We are living in the digital age. We have video. I can record one lesson. I could take the best teacher in the whole world, let's say a history teacher, and instead of him going to a college and he's teaching 20 kids and then every semester he teaches the same lesson again and again, I can record that lesson so that everybody in the world can see that lesson over and over and over. So we're building a digital library of great lessons. Like I teach oration, and I think I have probably 30 hours of lessons on public speaking. I'm not the best orator for sure, because it takes training, but we teach those subjects there. And then we have the mom's library. We're trying to educate moms and teach them how to implement this in their home, because really the academy can't do a whole lot without the assistance of mom and dad. Like right. I can't instill character in your kids through the academy. There's no way. You have to take them out to the high dive. You have to do the rock wall, right? You have to, and anyway, I talk about that. There's another book called Training Character for Greatness.
So is Blue Manor, hang on one sec, is Blue Manor, is that something that is available to the general public?
Yes.
BlueManor.com?
It's just Blue Manor Academy. We have 2 sites. We have education and academy. So you can look it up, BlueManorAcademy.com.
Okay, cool. Because that sounds exciting. And I hope parents will catch some of the zeal, some of the passion you have. And obviously there's wisdom to what you're saying. We live in such a, like you mentioned, a digital age, and there are so many kids who don't get out and explore or take risks. Or, I mean, when I think of the way myself and my brothers, the way we grew up, what we were able to do, the fun we were able to have on our own, compared to today where everything's organized by parents, there's little imaginative play that goes on, and the kids are so, it seems to me, I probably sound like the old codger here, but it seems to me the kids are so cooped up that they don't learn to overcome anything or imagine anything or think outside the box. And that's that's pre-wiring generations of kids to be dull and, again, worse, mediocre. Is that playing into how you guys are raising your kids and what you're doing there at Blue Manor?
Yeah, it is. And it's funny you mentioned youth because, all right, this is the latest book I've
What's
just
the name
published.
of that book?
This is Power. These are all Raising Children for Greatness books. This is Power. So there's the first one is Revealing School. That is to
Revealing School.
And that was to show you how horrible school is. And it's a lot more dangerous than you think. You think you can combat the liberal agenda. That's nothing. There's something called classical conditioning that they use in the public school. It's an involuntary response. You probably know this as a professor. Classical conditioning is conditioning in an involuntary response. So it really doesn't matter what you teach your kids at home. They will be conditioned or trained to think and behave a certain way.
Yeah.
Classical conditioning, like biting my nails. I don't believe in it. I've just been doing it for so long. I can't stop. I don't think about it anymore. But I'm not a believer in it. Does that make sense? So you might raise good, godly, conservative kids who, and they're independent minded. They believe in those values, but they act differently because they've been conditioned.
It's so true, because there are so many parents listening who are like, I don't know what's happening to my kids, or worse, there are parents listening who are thinking, I don't know what happened to my kids because we did everything right. We raised them in a Christian home, church, youth group involvement, camp, so forth. And they still came out as secular, postmodern, godless consumers of culture and proponents of that apathetic culture. So no, that's why I'm excited to have you on today, is to talk into this vacuum, because it's one thing that this is happening to tens of millions of students who are not in Christian homes, but that it is happening by the tens of millions to kids who are growing up in a Christian home means the parents precisely don't understand what's happening by the conditioning that you're shining the light on for us right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so the first power in the power book. So there's 9 powers. The first one we introduce parents and children to is youth, the power of youth. And people don't realize, it's a cliche. People say they're the future or whatever. I don't mean they're the future. I mean, right now, youth is extremely powerful. And that's why I would say that the New World Order socialist cabal has done everything they can to hamstring our children and to take our children from us.
Yeah.
Because youth is indomitable. And I give it's probably the coolest, I think it's the coolest thing, but a whole list of youth who turned the world upside down. One of them is Africanus, Scipio, I think it's Scipio Africanus. And basically they had this crazy youth guy named Hannibal. He was a young general and he was just conquering the Romans. He was from Carthage and he actually invaded Rome, conquered Rome. And Africanus, and that's why Africa is named Africanus after Africanus, who defeated Hannibal. But his father and his uncle were both Roman generals, wise Roman generals. You think like you knew this game, like chess, you're wise, you're smarter. They both got defeated by the young Hannibal. And it got so bad, they were killed actually by Hannibal. And it got so bad that the Roman Senate's like, hey, who are we going to send over? We'll give you the army and everything, but who wants to go back to Africa? Well, nobody wanted to do it except for Africanus, because he was a youth. And youth has this like immortal mindset. And it's ferocious. It's terrifying. And Africanus is like, sign me up. Nobody else wants a job, but youth is like, yes, absolutely. I want to slay this dragon. So he goes over there and he conquers Hannibal. And Hannibal's now older. You think he's a wiser, experienced general, but something about our old age softens us. And we know about that we could die. And it's just, we lose that immortal mindset. And so youth is super powerful. They're indomitable. You look at a lot of these big businesses that are started. A lot of them, they're prep schoolers and they did it in their youth. Like Zuckerberg, Facebook, he was 19 years old when he left Harvard, but he went to an elite prep school. And he started $1 billion empire at 19 years old.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I really think that we should be releasing our children a lot younger. Adolescence was invented by socialists, communists to keep children in school past the age of adulthood. So, generally speaking, you go through puberty, you can reproduce around 13, 14 years old. Adolescence is just invented.
Wow.
It's invented by through the evolutionary process, which was totally debunked. Okay, they basically believed in recapitulation, that you started off, and this was totally debunked, but they still use that to enslave the adult population through high school. So recapitulation said that you basically started off as an amoeba, and then you went through all the evolutionary process. You turn into a fish. You have the gills, of course, and they proved that. And you went through different stages of your evolution. And then when you were born, you're basically a chimp. And then when you get to your adolescence, you're like a Neanderthal. So you just eat and grunt and like you want sex or whatever. And then they say your brain kind of fully finishes forming around in your 20s, and then you're fully an adult. Well, recapitulation's totally debunked. It's just totally debunked. You're not ever a fish. Those are your ear canals. And you're never a chimp. You look at children, they're so intelligent. They're not stupid like chimps. They pick up a whole language in a few years. They master, if they babble, it's because they don't know the language, but they pick it up in a few years. They're extremely potent. And at any rate, that's why originally when public school started, you couldn't keep a kid past 13 because that's when you enter adulthood. Okay. But now, by reinventing Stanley Hall, inventing this theory of adolescence, they're able to keep kids, adults, from 13 to 18. And now they're trying to extend it to 21, because if they convince you you're not an adult till 21, then they can keep you longer in their indoctrination camps.
Yeah, it gives them 5 more years to indoctrinate you, right? I mean, one of the crazy things about COVID was my mom has a master's degree in English, and she said, this is so weird to watch COVID. The bureaucrats shut down the schools over COVID because the bureaucrats live and die for indoctrinating children. And here COVID is shutting down the indoctrination of children. So it either hurt the kids that they didn't get an education for a couple years, or I think the upside is that they might have had 2 less years of indoctrination for how insidious what's occurring at the public school level. This is a clear agenda that's going on now, and parents need to be discerning and wise about what's happening to their kids.
And if you put your kids in public school, you have a lot of parents. I know tons of parents, including my own, because a lot of my other kids or my family, they went through the public school system, and they've lost their faith and completely. Well, I probably shouldn't say too much, but. And they were like, what happened? It's like, if you put your kid in the public school.
You mean in your extended family?
No.
Your immediate family?
In my immediate family.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
So if you put your kids in the public school system, you're no longer raising or educating them for the most part. By the time you get to high school, I would get up, my experience, because my senior year, I didn't go to prep school. I went to a private school. So this is a private Christian school in Oregon. So you get up at 7:00. You do sports, so you stay at the school until about 5 or 6 o'clock. Sometimes you get home around 6 o'clock, and then they send you homework. So then you eat your dinner really quick. And I didn't usually have it with the family, because by the time I drove home, it was around 7 o'clock. And then you do your homework. It's time for bed. And they give you homework no matter how well you're doing in the subject. You could be straight A student, but you better do your homework. And I believe that was the socialists trying to invade the home and take up those few hours we could have actually impacted our children. Now they have to do the homework. And then over the weekend, they send homework. And over Christmas break, sometimes they send homework. And these kids, when they finally have a moment to breathe, they don't want to hear any lessons from their parents. They've been studying and thinking all day long. They just want to have fun.
Right.
And so the parents are feeding the children, and they're going on vacations, having fun with them. But all of the forming is being done in the public school system.
Right.
By design.
Yeah. And that's not even to mention the formation that occurs for the hours on end they spend with peers who more than likely do not embrace a Christian worldview, do not embrace a Christian understanding of reality.
People they never should have met at that age. These are kids that we should keep at a distance, because social pressure is so powerful, peer pressure. Yeah. They should be kept at a distance. You can evangelize those communities, you can give charity to those communities, but your kids should not be hanging out with some drug dealer's kids. That's insanity. One of the best things that we do at Blue Manor Academy is we've created a noble herd. And what is it? Is it iron sharpens iron? In the Bible it talks about. Yeah. But our community, this noble herd, they are raising the standard. They're challenging each other. Just like at the prep schools, it's like it wasn't cool to be an idiot at prep school. They posted your grades on the wall every day.
God bless them.
When I was in public school, it was like it was fun to be an idiot, and if you got an F, it showed you didn't care and you were rebellious or whatever. You go to prep school, it was positive peer pressure. There was pressure to perform, to do well, to be the best, right? And I would say it's 50-50. I would say the peers are worse. And they're mixing them all in the same classroom, and not removing the degenerate ones. And I,
But Britton,
I
you know that the classic challenge to that among parents would be, well, how are my kids going to be salt and light for Jesus if they're not in public school? How are the kids at public school going to learn about the gospel if there are no committed Christians there? That's the reigning challenge to that perspective. And your answer would be,
well, one, the proof's in the pudding. Everybody pretty much started off Christian in the public school system, and look at it today. So
right.
We weren't evangelizing any. For every kid your kid evangelizes or affects for the gospel, 10 of your kids have been recruited
That's right.
to be atheists. One.
That's exactly right.
Secondly, they can't talk in school. They can hardly communicate with their friends in school. They're not allowed to talk. They have to do the assignment, right? And there are three authorities. Okay, you have put them under the authority, not just of the school and maybe not of the school. You put them under the authority of the peers. And the peers have more power than you because the peers will destroy your child's life. They will torture your child and destroy their life. And you will discipline them, and you're in a power struggle with the peers. But you'll stop short of abuse. You might ground them a little bit. You might spank them a little bit. But in the public school system, they can be beaten up. They can be humiliated in front of girls. They can be socially ostracized and mocked every single day. That is some serious punishment. It's like handing your children over to the Romans to be tortured. I mean, It's horrific. We should protect our kids and invite other people into our community and be a light by our example.
Yep.
But we don't hand our kids over to the Romans.
Well, I'll tell you how I think about this, and it mirrors what you just said. My mission as a parent is my kid. My mission as a parent is not to get other parents' kids saved through my kid. My mission, my God-given mission, is to raise that kid and to do right by that kid. And if I fail at that, they're not going to have an effect. They're not going to be a societal presence, a salty presence, a yeasty presence. And I want to emphasize that for parents listening, because there's a lot of false guilt out there about parents. Well, if you don't have your kids in public school, how can they be salt and light? Yeah, well, if your kid ends up being a nihilistic, postmodern, secular, godless human being, you won't have done right by them by sending them to public school to get other kids saved. We need to rethink the whole strategy of mission here.
Yeah, the church has trained up evangelists and missionaries to send in, and they need to be properly trained. And the church should be evangelizing the pagan world, not our children. You have adults who have never shared the gospel with anybody in their life, not even their neighbors or anybody. And then they imagine that their 5-year-old's going to go into school and win over the school. It's absurd, and it's not happening. There's just no evidence that that's happening. And I always ask those parents, how many kids has your children brought to Christ in the public school system? And usually what it is it's the opposite. Their kids are out of control and they can't figure it out. And it's like, your kid isn't even light. Your kid has been become a student of the school, a child of the school system. Your kid is no longer light. You can't even save your kid anymore. And you think your kid is going to influence somebody? I don't know.
They've turned your kid into just one of the mindless sheeple. Hey, before I want to get into your talk, ask you some questions about the specific book, Be Great, that you published, but tell us again the 4 books you published prior, because I want parents to know those are available through your website, Blue Manor Academy as well. Please tell us about those. Give us the names of those 4 books.
So these are on Amazon. This is Revealing School. This is the first book I wrote in my
Revealing School.
20.
All right.
And Revealing School is if your kid is in the public school system, you should read the book. It'll transform your mind. It's funny. I said things in here that people are like, you're insane, like conspiracy theorists. And now it's like, oh, that's common knowledge. But you get to the last part and it'll blow your mind. I've had people in the homeschool movement forever who've like, I've never heard this stuff before. This is incredible. It goes back to Aristotle and Alexander the Great and Plato. Like they understood the power of anti-education. The only advantage, it's anyway, you can read the book. The next one is just education. This is the shortest book. This is just like,
it's called what again?
Just education, but it's raising children for greatness.
The title is Education. Okay, go on.
And it's just to give you a taste of what a prep school mentality, raising children for greatness movement looks like. Just what is it? How do you motivate kids for greatness? The worst thing you can do is fun. That's the least powerful motivator. At prep school, there was hardly any fun. And yet it was amazing how motivated we were. Kids want to be challenged. And that's what's wrong with the youth groups today. They want to fight the battles. They want to slay the dragon. And pieing people in faces, which is okay. Fun has a place, but like when I went through special forces training and they went around the table, like, why are you here? Not one person said fun. And they're putting their lives on the line and they're going to be tortured. And it's horrible, brutal training. Fun is a low motivator. But anyway,
That's
this just
good.
gives
No,
you the
that's
like the
really important.
mentality.
That's really important. Okay, book number
The
3,
next one, character.
character.
In the public schools and in most home schools, in church, Sunday schools now, it's all about niceness, tolerance, being kind to one another.
Compassion.
Niceness, yeah, niceness isn't even a virtue. It depends who you're being nice to and why.
Right.
But how do you train character for greatness? And we talk about how it cannot be intellectual. It can't be here's why niceness is good. Here's why love is good. It has to be labors, like Hercules going out and proving who he was. Like through the labors is how you build character. You know, you want to have compassion for your neighbor. Could you have your kid pick their favorite toy and give that one away? Donate that one. You know, that shows compassion. How do you develop self-control? Everybody wants self-control. How do you develop that? At prep school, it was a military school. They put us at attention for 30 minutes. You can't blink. You can't have a facial expression. You can't move. Bugs are flying in your nose in Virginia, like the gnats going up in your nose. You know, that's how you build self-control. You have total control of the body. You learn to discipline your body. So many kids are bad because they just lack self-control. They do not know how to control themselves. How do you train? I think my favorite chapter in this book is contentment. And man, anyway, people respect. How do you train respect? You don't tell a kid to be respectful. Conscience. It's an amazing book. It's very counterculture, but it's how you train character for greatness, like the kings would train their children.
Sounds exciting.
The last book, I don't even know where I put it now. There it is. This is probably the coolest. This is Power.
There's a book called Power. Okay.
Just
By
Power.
Britton La Tulippe. Britton La Tulippe.
Yeah, and Robert Greene, he is a New World Order writer. He wrote 48 Laws of Power. And it's just like, when you get done reading that book, you think I'd have to sell my soul. And it's just the devil's bag of tricks, how to backstab and manipulate people. And I started thinking about it. I said, you know, God has actually given us power. Good is actually more power than evil. And there was really a clash of societies with the secret societies and the Freemasons and stuff like that going up against the kings. It was a clash of power, and they were overwhelmed by the Freemasons, and they collapsed. But really, good has more power, but we've never heard of it. And Robert Greene is like the antithesis. It's like dark, it's evil power. It's like satanic power, how to manipulate and control people and all this stuff. And it's like, we have our own powers. And there are 9 powers that we introduce in this book. And it's the first one is youth, the power of youth. I've talked about that. The power of genius. How do you create genius? It's not very hard. My kids, my daughter, her first year, won the state championship in chess against Ambrose and the prep schools and kids who'd been trained by grandmasters, you know. And then we brought 3 kids before COVID, and then it was over. So I had 3 kids, and they all won state championship in their grade for chess.
That's so fun.
They mostly taught themselves. We think genius is just something you're born with. You can develop genius. It's not super hard. And we talk about how to do that. Mozart's a great example, and Beethoven, because both of their dads were great musicians, but not genius. And they said, I'm going to make a son. I think it started with Mozart. His father said, I'm going to create a prodigy, a genius in music. And he didn't start with a 13-year-old or a 15-year-old or even himself. He knew he couldn't do it. He started with a baby. Genius is wired in the youngest children because you wire that brain to think in a certain way. By my time, I've been so wired my brain in 15 different directions, I'll never achieve genius. I can be pretty good. I can master something, but not genius. So genius is a power that you can give your children. Wisdom. They don't teach wisdom literature anymore.
No.
Wisdom is a subject of greatness that the prep schools still teach. And it's not arbitrary, and you don't learn it from your grandpa. He might not have wisdom. Wisdom doesn't necessarily come from experience. There's wisdom literature like Aesop's fables. There's over 2,000 fables, and it's general truth. Solomon's or David's, whoever wrote it, Proverbs are wisdom that you should memorize. It's generally true that, and this is how you should live your life. Wisdom literature used to be huge. The Greeks, everybody studied wisdom literature. It's not a subject in school. You should introduce your children to wisdom so they know how at a very early age how to act wisely so that it goes better with them. Wealth, people don't know how to create wealth, pass wealth. It's a real struggle, and that's why we work for the enemy and we build the enemy's. We're like slaves to the enemy. They own all the businesses now. So
Yeah.
how do you create wealth, protect your wealth, grow it? Society, you need to be educated in society. Like the rules of manners and etiquette, that's not just some arbitrary Victorian standards. Like those are the rules of respectability. And I talk about that in the book. Like, here's the rules and here's why they did this. It's incredible.
That's
It's very
exciting.
interesting.
You've got some very exciting, fascinating topics there and across all your books. Britton, I'm just thinking to step back out to 20,000 feet or so, the average parent listening to me is thinking, my goodness, I don't have the money to send my kid to prep school. We don't even have a prep school around us. But there must be possibilities and alternatives and options for homeschooling that are becoming more prevalent, more to the fore now, especially after 2 years, 3 years of COVID nonsense shutdowns. I know that homeschooling is emerging. What are your thoughts and reflections on that angle?
Yeah, so I was in the same position. When I first started with my daughter, I said I wanted to send her to a prep school. I had no idea how expensive they were. And you're looking at 30, 40, 50 to $100,000 a year. And I have 8 kids.
Wow.
So it's just no way. There's no way I could afford it.
Yeah.
And so I started looking for other options, and there are none in the homeschool world. It's the closest thing you can get is classical education. And so we started building the academy ourselves. And we've written the entire philosophy in these books, and we're building it out. It is not perfect. It's not there, but at least it's heading in the right direction. And it's Blue Manor Academy, and it's $25 a month because we can record the video one time and give it to your kid. And then we have a student-led academy. Like I said, we just implemented this as Kids Teach Kids. So kids are starting to make their own videos and teach other students. And it teaches them to be orators and presenters. We just did it a month ago. The videos are low quality, but watch when kids start taking charge of their own education, it'll skyrocket. And they're producing their own content in a safe environment, not on YouTube. And that's my advice, is to go to if you don't want Blue Man Academy, but it's affordable. It's $25 a month right now. Read these books and you can implement it in your own home.
And Blue Manor Academy is for what ages, what grades?
So we say preschool to 6th grade right now, but that's not true. Blue Manor Academy operates like a jujitsu belt system. Okay. We have kids that come into the academy in 6th grades and they don't even know the stuff from preschool. So don't think of it like that. Just work your way through the levels. We've gotten up to 7th and 8th grade. So there's 10 levels now. We haven't finished them. And we will continue to build this out. And it will be education for life. You don't graduate ever. You just go to the next level. And so when you're 40 years old, hopefully by then we'll have something, level 41, and you'll continue to read the great works. You'll continue to master oration, the subjects of greatness. And mainly we're trying to create a noble herd of champions that can go toe to toe with the New World Order, because the prep schools are not the answer. They've mostly been taken over by the New World Order. You look at Donald Trump, Biden, any of those people, the Bushes, these are not good, godly men necessarily. I like Trump, but
he's not a Christian.
I doubt he's a Christian.
Right.
So we have no champions in the field, but we want somebody who could go up and take down a Donald Trump, a great orator, somebody who has the wealth to hire Christians when we're being ostracized and kicked off platforms.
Yeah.
My dad was a doctor. He lost his medical degree in an afternoon because he spoke at a Trump rally in Oregon. I don't know if you saw that, but in an afternoon, the medical board took his license for refusing to wear a mask.
Wow.
So, like, we need Christians who can employ Christians now because we're being pushed out of the marketplace.
Yeah.
So that's what I recommend. Join the movement. We're trying. We're building.
I may have to have you on again so I can talk to you about your book. Be great. This has been really, really fascinating. I'm grateful that you came on the show. I think it's so timely. And again, there's the specific issue of education and children, and it doesn't get any more foundational than that. But there is the whole element of a Christian cultural engagement. And if we're not intentional and strategic and mindful about that, we're just going to get rolled over by the tidal wave. And I think that's what is happening right now to most of the church.
Yeah, and that is our job. And we focus so much on the heroes aspect. That's why I pick certain heroes. Is we always think of, if you want to serve the church, you need to be a preacher, to go to seminary, you need to go the traditional church route. Where I think that we need people in society, in government, champions. We need bankers. We need businessmen who are devoted to the church and are ready to do battle on our behalf. Because right now we have plenty of preachers and youth pastors and all that stuff. That's great. And I'm not belittling that. I'm saying we have plenty of those, but where are
Right.
the Christian bankers?
Right.
Where are the Christian platforms? Like, we're not going to be able to buy and sell soon.
Yeah.
So that's what we're doing. We're training champions who we want to go toe to toe with the New World Order and
Outstanding. I love how strategic you're being. I love that you view it as a war. That kind of language made me nervous across most of my life, but now I believe we are in an unprecedented cultural war. And I do believe one of the end goals is to entirely shut the church down. So I'm with you on that. Hey, thanks so much for coming on the show. It's been a privilege and an honor. God bless you, your family, Blue Manor Academy, your books, what you're doing there. I pray the Lord's favor on you and that this would just explode into something dynamic for you and fill your sails all along the way too.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. It's great to talk to you.
Thanks so much, Britton.
Yep.